Welcome to the Pool Genius One and Done Show, the final one and done show of the 2026 PGA One and Done season. BMW Championship time. For most of us, that means the final pick of the year. This will be the last show. I do know that some of you sickos probably play in pools that use the Tour Championship. Most do not. But if that's the case, we will still, if you're a subscriber to Pool Genius, and you've set your pool up to use the Tour Championship, you'll still have access to all the data that I show in these videos each week, the data grid, the odds to win, our popularity estimates, all that. And secondly, you can jump into our Discord because we're not going to do a video knowing that 10% or so of all pools use the Tour Championship and sometimes with some weird rules. But jump into the Discord. We will have some stuff posted there regarding next week's event. But this is the last video, so let's get to it. Let's get to the BMW and making that final pick, because if you're still watching, that means you got something on the line probably in some of your one and done pools, or you just like to look at my face, which I totally get that, but I'm going to assume the former. And so let's get to the picks and analysis. I'm going to pull up here our data grid with the favorites for the BMW Championship. And we'll start at the top, of course. Needs no introduction. He ran away with the tournament last week, 8-stroke victory. No drama on Sunday when it came to first place. Plenty of drama for those of us in one and done pools for second through 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th place. But no drama up top. Scotty Scheffler, your favorite. Again, likely very low owned because very low availability. But he is your favorite. Then we got a guy who did the complete opposite. Rory McIlroy had skipped the FedEx St. Jude a year ago. He played this year. He might have wished he had skipped again because he did not play well at all, was near the bottom. Only a really poor performance by Robert McIntyre kept McIlroy from the very bottom of the list on day one, but he finished well off the pace, never in contention. Rory is number 2 here, but has played well in BMW Championships. Even though they changed courses, something we'll get to. He's done pretty well at these events. Xander's 3rd on the list, Ludwig 4th, Sam Burns coming off yet another close call where he did not close well on Sunday. He had a chance, an outside chance, though certainly running down Scotty would not have been very easy at all. Burns at least entered the day in the final group. Cam Young up there as well. Tommy Fleetwood, Matt Fitzpatrick. And I'm going to go down the list because a lot of those names, Sam Burns is probably the most available on that list, but let's pan down to the next group as well, because this is a group that may draw interest, as we can see, based on being a little more available to more one and done entries. And so there's some names in here that are going to come up in your pools. Chris Gotterup, Siwoo Kim, Hideki, and Hovland right there together, just ahead of Cantlay and Wyndham Clark. And then we've got Justin Thomas, Colin Morikawa, Jake Knapp, and Tom Kim playing well and still showing up. So that's the top of the odds board when it comes to the BMW Championship. Again, this is a 50-player field. The top 50 in the FedEx standings at the conclusion of last week got in. These same 50 will have eligibility to play in every signature event next year. So everybody playing this week will be in every signature event if they want to do so. As long as they don't withdraw, they are in. Everybody else gets to try to play their way into those events, but these 50 are in. So you're going to see a lot of these golfers next year as well at the big money events. And let's get to popularity next. I'm going to give you my popularity estimates, but I want you to remember the most important thing is your pool. There's a saying, all politics are local. Well, in this case, all pick popularity is local to what your pool and the entries around you have. Because I can give you estimates, and I've reviewed several of the pools I'm in and who has what available. But hitting pick popularity at this point, you can't just look at raw availability numbers for the pool because some people will stop making picks. So, I mean, there's going to be more Schefflers and more Cam Young's and Matt Fitzpatrick entries that are available in the pool than that are actually going to be played, because again, some of those are entries that are dead or have stopped making picks and still have those players. But here's the golfers, when I look, that show up a little more available, as likely among the top options for the entries that have them, and who I think will have more or less popularity this week. So we'll start at the top. Victor Hovland kind of falls at that line. A, he's won this event before, so I think he's going to have some interest there. But secondly, he is a little more available than that tier in front of him, right? Very few, when you look at especially the leaders, and that's who people are trying to chase, have Scotty Scheffler. If you have Cam Young, very few have Rory or Xander. And so, you're going to want to check your pool if you do have any of those players. And if you are the highest ranked entry that has them, it's almost an auto fire. But for the entries that don't have some of those guys and the choices they fall to, Hovland is among those choices that tends to rank as a likely pick on a fair amount of entries. So Hovland is my top projected, along with Sam Burns, narrowly ahead of Sam Burns. But I don't think anybody's going to get like 15%. I think you're going to, again, because we're at the end of the year, picks have been spread out over the year, you're going to see some dispersion. Each individual pool may be different, and you're going to want to check what's around you in your pool. But I think Hovland and Burns are your most likely candidates to be among the most popular. Burns was the most popular last week, and he's still a little more available than the other guys in the top 10 on the odds board. So I do think those that didn't use them last week still have them. They're probably in a semi-chasing position. A lot of the leaders will probably use Burns at this point, but he's going to have some popularity. And that's only going to be held down, I think, by people coming off of Burns for uniqueness reasons. And then I think that next tier is Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas. I think those guys are also kind of in that. They're inside the top 15, 20 on the odds board, and a little more available again than some of the other guys around them. And so you're going to see those guys tend to bubble up a little more in a lot of these pools. And Tom Kim's close to that, along with Ludwig, who I think is probably the most available of the top 5 guys and the most likely to show up. He's been used fairly heavily, but not as heavily as the other guys in the top 5. So I do think you're going to see some Ludwig entries near the top. And then we go down from there. Goddard, Matsuyama been heavily used over the last few weeks. And Jake Knapp, for those that hadn't used him, he was hurt all during the summer, didn't get used heavily after a good spring. So he's available to some. I think Knapp also falls in that range, and we'll talk about course itself as well. So I think Knapp will have popularity. So that's kind of my estimates, and I put some other notables here. I think Scheffler is going to be around 2%, depending on the pool. Because again, just if your pool says 6% available, that doesn't mean that's where he's going to end up on the final set of picks. There was a pool, I hit Scheffler on one entry. It was a trailing entry. I think I was in like 50th or 60th, and now I'm in 17th. I was the highest ranked Scheffler picker in the pool. There were a couple in front of me that could have used him. But if I went by just looking at the availability numbers, I would have thought he was going to be a little more popular than that. I might have stayed off of him. But I looked and I was like, well, actually, the entries I care about, only a handful have them, and maybe they choose to save them. So I went ahead and fired him. So that's an example like where Scheffler's availability in the pool did not match the pick rate, because the ones who have them are mostly the entries way back who kind of stopped playing. And so Scheffler 2%. I think McIlroy will be a little more popular than that, though I do think what happened last week will hold that down. He's a little more available, but I see him coming in sub 4, but you might see an entry or two near the top take McIlroy. Schauffele tends to be used up on a lot of the top entries. So if you have him in a chasing position or you're a little behind, check to see who can use him, because maybe nobody in front, or maybe only one or two can actually match you on him, and you can make a big move. So check that. And then I think Fleetwood will have just outside my top 10. I have him at 4.1. He is going to be somewhat available. And Cam Young, heavily used. I think a few that have him will use him. but I think heavily used. So that's how I see the popularity breaking down at the BMW this week. Let's turn to the course this week for the BMW Championship. The BMW, unlike the FedEx St. Jude, which takes place every year in Memphis at the same course, the BMW rotates, and this year it returns to Bellerive Country Club in St. Louis for the first time in a long time. It's been played here only once before since it became the BMW Championship. That was in 2008. So most of these players wouldn't have been playing on tour when that happened. The last time it was used at any PGA event was for the 2018 PGA Championship. That was won by Brooks Koepka, not in this field, so not someone to consider this week. But so it's been a while. There isn't much direct course history for any of these players here. But we can talk about what this course offers and how you want to think about it. I think you can see some of this if you look at if you looked over the odds board and see which golfers are kind of maybe down lower than you would expect just in a general week and who's up. So this is a par 70, almost 7,500 yard course as it's going to play at the BMW Championship. On the upper half in length, and I think it's going to have a lot of commonalities with a course like Memorial, where the Houston Open is played and which tends to be a bomber's course where distance off the tee matters more so than accuracy off the tee. You can hit the ball. It's a Robert Trent Jones design, but you can hit the ball here, and you're probably going to need length to gain advantages off the tee. It's a course where distance off the tee, club head speed, ability to hit approaches from long distances, because there are some long par threes that are going to really test golfers with both the raw distance and how they play that are going to require some long shots. And so, as well as approaches on some of the par fours. So golfers that can meet that, I think another one that you're going to look at, the BMW tends to have winners that are in the double digits. So it's not like it's a major quality 500 might win it. But I do think you're going to have distance and home birdies and eagles on the right holes. And so I think you're going to want to play to that. TPC Craig Ranch, the Byron Nelson is another example. That was won by Wyndham this year. And by the way, if you remember, Gary Woodland won the Houston Open. And so I think that's one. I mean, Woodland's not played as well recently and is a longer shot. But that's the profile if you're going outside the top golfers that I think you want to be hunting for is, in addition to looking like how are golfers playing now, do they have maybe the distance needed to not have to have everything go correctly? Because like a Russell Henley, for example, is way down the odds board this week, and it's because of this distance factor. This is not a course that sets up well for Russell Henley. And so you're going to want to think about that as you think about picks, especially if you're trying to get a little more unique. The other thing I want to talk about before I get to my pick breakdown is the payout structure, because let's pull this up, this chart right here. This is the payout if you were to hit a solo at the BMW. Get $3.6 million for first, same as the signature events. A little over 2.1 for second, 1.3 for third, etc. Graduating on down. Dead last gets you $66,000. Anything inside the top 30 is going to get you at least $150,000. You're not going to get to $100,000 or less until the bottom 10 at this event. So everybody's getting some money, and so you got to think about that as you plot out. Like, the distance you're trailing, everybody's going to add to that. And if if a golfer finishes in the upper half, they're probably adding 180 to 200,000 more to their score. So you really need to think of it in terms of that. Like, what do I need? Well, you probably need to add like 150, 200,000 minimum to assess how risky you need to be and what your target numbers are relative to where you want to reach. So keep that in mind that, up top it's the same, but the bottom is getting paid a little more than we might see at other events because there's only 50 golfers in this field. And so you're really going to want to hunt for those scores that get you to your key target numbers. So here's what I would suggest as you look at where you are in pools, where I'm in the standings, what can I get to, whether you're in the money or not? How can I improve myself? Like, what's realistic? Looking at both, I need to hit I need to be within like 3.4 million to have any chance at catching somebody up the board. I probably need to be within 1 million to have a chance where I just need to hit a top 3. And I probably need to be within 500,000 or so to have a chance where I'm in the top 10, if I can get a top 10 pick to move up the board. And the same thing going down. How far ahead are some golfers? How many golfers are within 500,000? 1 million and 3.4 of me that could reach me in the worst case scenario. Those are the things you're going to want to ask yourself. You cannot cover every single person behind you if you're in a prize position. It's just impossible. What you hope for is that there's only one winner awarded each week. And you're hoping if you're in a prize position, you can't really improve yourself and you're trying to defend, that it's not like one of the relatively more popular picks that you don't have that beat you. Because if a lot of these picks win and they're 2-3% picked, well, that may be one entry jumping around you, 2 entries, right? What you don't want is 5-10 to jump around you because they were on a more popular pick. So if you realize your upside isn't as great as your downside, you probably want to make a defensive pick where you're looking at what those individuals had. You're looking at who I'm projecting might be popular, seeing where that matches up. And let's say you had a choice between somebody like a Victor Hovland and somebody near him, like a Colin Morikawa, or below him on the odds board, that doesn't have the projected popularity or the availability. Morikawa makes sense if you're trying to run people down as that shot that's probably less likely to be picked ahead of you. But Hovland's that defensive pick to cover more entries that are coming for you. And so think about it that way. So I'm going to close the show. Ordinarily I would give you my top 3 picks, this and that, right? Give you some golfers to long shots to think about. For this week, you got to play to your score. I can tell you I'm using this golfer, and that may not be the right golfer for you. You need to look at what people have in front of you and what you have. And I'm going to walk through one of my entries to give you some examples of how this works in practice. So you want to not only think about like who you have, but also who do your opponents have, what makes the most sense for my entry, because I could give you my top 3, but that's very specific to my entries, and your entries may need a different pick to be made. So I'm going to walk you through more of the thought process of how I'm arriving at the picks on the entries that still have something in play, where I can catch people, where I can defend. I'm going to pull up one that's in kind of a defensive and attack position to kind of let you know how I'm going to think about this. This is an example. In a 100 and something entry pool, I am in third in the money in the upper 15s. I am a few million back of first, so I really need to hit a winner to have any chance against the first place entry. I'm 700,000 back a second, and then I'm ahead narrowly of a few others, defending third. And as you can see on this board, I'm going to pull this over here. I got a lot of names crossed out. This is who this entry is actually used. And you see a lot of crossed out names. So the top names available to this entry by grade and by odds to win are Chris Gotterup, Wyndham Clark, and Justin Thomas. And I can go on down. I also have Tom Kim. I have Jake Knapp and Maverick McNeely. Okay. So those are some of my top options available to me for a final pick. So in a vacuum, I'd want to pick Chris Gotterup here, right? I think he'd be my preference too. That's what the odds say, and that's probably where my preference would be. But the problem is, entry number 2, the one 700,000 in front of me, has Chris Gotterup, has a roughly similar outlook. There's some other golfers near Gotterup he could take, But there's like a 50% chance that he takes Goddard, I think. 33 to 50, like something like 1-3, 1-2 chance. Entry number 2 takes Goddard, in which case I'm cooked. If I take Goddard as well, I'm blocked from advancing any further. Goddard probably in this pool overall isn't going to be more popular than some of the other options I have, Clark and Thomas, based on the availability who's behind me, but he is available to entry number 2. So if I want to make a move, I need to make picks that I know entry 1 and entry 2 do not have. My highest ranked golfer there is Wyndham Clark. They do have one of them has Justin Thomas. I believe Tom Kim's available to at least one. So I could take some of those guys further down. Like I like Tom Kim, and I would consider him as well. But my ideal pick's probably going to be a golfer I think will have reasonably moderate popularity overall and who's left in the pool, and who the leaders can't, the entries in front of me can't match. Because I don't have to take the chance that they pick Goddard or Tom Kim. I know they aren't picking Wyndham Clark because neither of them can. So in this particular pool, regardless of who I might choose in a vacuum, my pick has to be Wyndham Clark. He's the pick that gives me a chance to make that move. He gives me the chance to pass entry number 2 if I can beat him heads up by 700,000. Basically, if I can get a top, 5, top 6 out of Wyndham Clark and his pick doesn't do as well. So that's the move I have to make in this one. So that's an example of how I'm thinking about it. If I'm further back, I'm going to pull up. Before I do this, I do want to. This is a quick aside. This is just for us to geek out on. We have our season planner, and I'm going to pull down here the golfers used. This is just fun to look at. Here are the golfers I've used on this entry. So it's used a lot of the big names. As you can see, I've used pretty much everybody, which is why Goddard and Clark are my 2 highest ranked left. But it's fun to look back. This entry placed because it timed the market pretty well on getting some seconds and thirds out of these guys up here. But I mean, I used Hao Tong Lee, Rico Hoey, Max Greiserman, Daniel Berger on this entry, Jordan Spieth. Other than that, I think everybody else used on this entry is playing in this event. And so just fun to look at the names that are end up being part, because it's all about hitting the right combinations, but fun to look at those names. But I'm going to go back and pull up a different entry or pull up a blank board so you can see without names crossed out. Kind of where I would think about, again, I went through popularity earlier, but I want to go through and tighten this up so you can see it. But the odds board and where you probably need to get to depending. So I talked about a case where I'm largely defending behind me, and I have a few entries right in front that I can target, that I can study who they got available and just see, okay, try to put them on 1, 2, or 3 picks and stay off those picks. But let's say you're further down and there's a bunch of entries, and at some point those entries are going to have some of the golfers you're considering. That doesn't mean they're going to take them. They may not be what you would put them on as their most likely pick, but they have them as options. So you just got to kind of do the best you can to make educated guesses and hope it falls your way the further back you are. But I do want to talk about like where I think you need to end up, depending on how many entries you need to pass and things like that. We kind of went over it, but the Hovland, Cantlay, Clark group, I think, is going to be reasonably popular. They fall here inside the plus 3,000 range. Morikawa less available, and again, I think because of the length a little bit, that's why he's below some of these other golfers on the odds board. I think Jake Daptis is a good fit for him. I think it's a good fit for Minwoo Lee, which is why you see him there on the odd board, and the youngsters Thorbjornsen and Brennan. So I think like that Minwoo Lee, Thorbjornsen, Brennan group is right around 1%, maybe higher in a pool, maybe not. So that's probably like, if you're worried, people might pick Knapp, people might pick, from among the Clark Thomas group, Tom Kim might be popular. I think where you're going to want to go in that size of pool, let's say you got to pass like 20 entries and you're trying not to get duped, maybe by other than maybe one other pick, that let's say 50 to 100 entries back of where you want to get to. So you need to be reasonably unique. If you're further back than that, 200, 300, and you need to be on an entry that's really unique, I think you've got to come all the way down. We've seen Rose, and Højgaard certainly has the distance for this course. They haven't been playing as well lately, but they are longer shots that aren't going to be hugely popular. They could be under 0.5%, one out of every 200 or so entries on them. And then we see Gary Woodland, who won the Houston Open, is down here as well. He's one I would have kind of in my bag. Could have a little popularity, but he has played well lately. Depends on how many you need to pass. Again, he'd be the one I'd say is more likely to get above one out of every 200, but not to 1%. So those are kind of some of the names I would consider down here. If you're further back, if you're still technically alive, but you really need to hit a unique pick and hope it finishes top 3, top 2, wins it all to pull off the comeback. So that's where I would look for that. And with that concludes the show. Thank you so much for watching our show this year. Thank you so much for all the comments in YouTube. Thank you to our subscribers. Again, we couldn't do this without you. We will be gone for a bit for one and done, but I will be around, and NFL content is already going up. If you are in NFL pools, more and more is going to be coming out from this point forward. So check the channel. And if you're just here for golf, we will see you next year. Remember, the 2027 PGA season starts, I believe it's January 21st. They go straight to the California swing. We get a little time off around the holidays, but the PGA season will pick back up. They'll have the fall events, but the regular tour will pick back up in January. We will see you then. Good luck.